Welcome to today's episode of A Slice of Medieval, which is actually episode 99, and we're still going. Will we make it to the 100? Well, let's see. Today's guest is Stephen Veerapen. Born in Glasgow to a Scottish mother and a Mauritian father, he was raised in Paisley. Pursuing an interest in the 16th century, he was awarded a first-class honours degree in English, focusing his dissertation on representations of Henry VIII's 6 wives. He's the author of The Wisest Fool, The Lavish Life of James VI and First, and lives in Glasgow. And his latest book is what he is here to talk about today, and the character behind it, of course. So his latest book, Overlord, The Life and Reign of Henry VIII, is hitting the shops as we speak. And Stephen has joined us for one of our Tudor specials to discuss the man himself, Henry VIII, probably the most divisive figure of Tudor history. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So when I saw that you were publishing Overlord, and I was said to Derek, this is the perfect person to get on for talking about Henry VIII. So I suppose the first thing, we need a bit of background, don't we? So tell us about Henry's childhood and the one thing that always bugs me when people talk about Henry VIII, which is, was he destined for the church?
Yes. So I take it, Sharon, you have been reading online discourse as well, and there's always someone that will confidently state Henry VIII was destined for the church. He was not, as you know. There was never any indication that Henry was destined for the church. And in fact, it would have been a bizarre thing for his father, Henry VII, to have done to intend him for the church. He was always intended to be the spare, basically. Yeah. So he was educated extremely well, as was pretty much par for the course for that part of the early 16th century. He got his French, he got his Latin, he got his history. He was intended to be one of the great landowners, to be a support to the intended king, his older brother Arthur. So the intention was always that Henry would be a great landowner. Certainly, I'm sure he was expected to donate to the church, which was a very Catholic church at that time. He was expected to support the church, but he was expected to be a secular landowner.
Yeah, it's one of my bugbears. It winds me up a little, as you can tell. Because they go, well, he was educated for the church and younger sons joined the church. And my argument to that is, not in England.
Yes, just say, which younger sons, name one.
Yeah. Illegitimate sons might have joined the church, but younger sons definitely did not. And there's not a single example of it.
Where did it come from then? Where did this myth come from, I wonder?
So it started being bandied around in the 17th century by kind of early historians, to use the word loosely. But my feeling is that it was a 17th century joke about second sons, because we have evidence of, or a kind of joke that was doing the rounds when James VI and First was king, about how his sons kind of joked about one of them being the Archbishop of Canterbury, the younger one, Charles, who again, second son who became king. So I think that's where it sprang from. No one was saying it in the 16th century. No one was saying it during Henry's childhood, during his youth, during his lifetime. Even it was never a thing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we've cleared that up, because that is one of my, I wanted to get that out there to get people thinking and realising, yes, it was something that they did in France. And I think there's at least one Scottish prince who joined the church, but it wasn't a thing in England.
No, never. It was a thing amongst noble families in England. Certain noble families would do it, but not the royal family, not the king and not the king's sons. So, I mean, another possible interpretation is that it was a kind of 17th century dig at Henry VII, implying he was just another noble. He wasn't kind of worthy of being king. I don't find all that convincing, but either way, it's not true anyway. He was never ever destined for the church. The other, I suppose, assumption is that because he was given a fairly comprehensive education, people have misidentified that as being, oh well, churchmen got good education, but it was just something that was going on in educational circles at that time. So
Yeah.
nothing to do with the church.
Yeah, I mean, they argue the same for King John, which would have been like, wow. But just because he was educated at an abbey for a little while, so he must have been destined for the church. It's like, yeah, right. So the rest of Henry's childhood, was it happy?
Yeah, I think it was absolutely happy. In fact, if anything, he was a fairly indulged child, a fairly spoiled child, I think, which you would never know looking at the adult man.
No.
Completely overcame that. But it was a fairly indulged childhood. I mean, he was a child of plenty compared to, for example, his father's youth, which had been fraught politically, had involved a lot of upheaval and everything. Henry was protected from all of that. There were things going on in England when he was young. There were rebellions against Henry VII and so on. But Henry VIII was protected from these things. He was raised as the king's second son.
Am I right in thinking that his upbringing was largely surrounded by women in his household?
Oh, yes. Well, that again, when he was particularly young, so up until the time he would have been breeched as a little man, he would have lived entirely amongst the women.
Yeah.
It does remind me of the childhood of Edward IV's two sons, you know, where Prince Edward, the heir, was sent off to Ludlow to learn to rule, and Prince Richard, the spare, was kept with his mum and his sisters at court rather than set up in his own household. And that seemed to be the same with Henry, wasn't it? He was kept with his sister Margaret.
Yes.
Whereas Arthur was kept apart.
Yes, to go and learn the business of ruling, to go off to Wales and learn how to be a little king. Henry was part of this kind of peripatetic royal nursery, which be moved around the Thames Valley, really, but living with his sisters. As far as we know, interestingly about Henry, not seeming to develop any strong relationship with his sisters, at least there's no evidence of it.
No.
Very tempting to think because he spent time with them as a child, he must have had a very strong bond with them. There's no evidence of that. I mean, it's very interesting with Henry. Evidence of his familial bonds, of his strong links with family and so on, are kind of conspicuous by their absence. I think he was just a very good custodian of his feelings. He kept whatever feelings he had very much to himself, unless he was performing them.
I do get the impression that he was somebody who, if he'd been told no a few times in his childhood, his life might have been different.
Which I'm sure we'll talk about later. Yes, Henry first being told, no, you can't have something, and he did not respond well.
Yeah. And also, I read somewhere just recently that he was jealous of his sister Margaret because she actually became a queen before he became king, didn't she? So he would have had to bow to her when she became queen, when he'd probably been lording it over her in the nursery for so many years. And then suddenly she's Queen of Scots and he's still just a Duke of York.
Yes, and she was very much treated as a queen from the moment that the marriage was confirmed. Before she'd gone off to Scotland or anything, she spent still about a couple of years in England waiting to be sent off. She married very, very young, to older James IV. But yes, she then gained the same status and position as her mother at that time at the English court.
When he eventually succeeded to the throne, obviously Henry VII's reign had its issues, particularly towards the end. How was he received? How was the new king, the coronation, all of that received?
An interesting question, Derek. I was kind of reflecting on this as we see. I mean, we've gone through revolving doors of prime ministers in the last few years. There's a kind of standard narrative, and there's lots of evidence for it, that there was this wave of acclamation. Everyone loved this bright young king. He was fantastic, and how different everything was going to be. There was quite a lot of reshaping of Henry VII's reign, and I think Henry VIII, the young Henry VIII, was complicit in this. Try and make the previous reign look as bad as possible so that you can then ride the wave of popular acclaim that things are going to be different, that things will change. I suppose you can almost hear things can only get better being played as he became king. That was the narrative that Henry VIII wanted, and a lot of his courtiers wanted as well, because they wanted to be part of this sense of things will change, things will get better. That was really Henry VIII's pitch, I think, is I am changing things, I am going to be very liberal and very just. And that's something that actually stuck with him, believe it or not, until the end of his life. The idea that he was liberal and he was just. And if you didn't believe it, that was your problem.
And of course, nobody's saying no to him or telling him the truth. So, yes.
That was one of the great things, or must have been one of the great things, is if you were Henry VIII, you were never wrong. So it must have been great to just never ever be wrong about anything.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Right.
it's kind of I understand what you're saying there, because the sort of traditional view is Henry VII, austere, formal, penny pinching minder. Henry VIII, it's colour rather than black and white. But I mean, the evidence now really suggests that Henry VII actually spent quite a lot on show, courtly, decoration.
Yeah.
So that he didn't appear some poverty-stricken, wannabe.
Yeah.
So
Henry VIII learned a lot of his trade in terms of projection and of majesty and all of that stuff from Henry VII, who imported it from Burgundy. So yes, Henry VIII gets the credit for taking further a lot of what his father was already doing.
And then anything bad, just blame Dad.
That was all his fault, not Henry VIII at all.
It's like the
Nothing was
previous.
ever his fault.
Yeah,
Either,
you can just imagine the previous administration.
Yes. So it's good politics as well. It still is used. Everything is the last guy's fault.
Yeah. Well, it's like plumbers. The previous guy didn't know what he was doing,
Yeah.
So I suppose that's the next question then. Was Henry a good king? What were his strengths?
See, this is a very, very thorny question, because of the religious changes, really, that Henry VIII made, the break with Rome, the dissolution of the monasteries. That has obviously cast a very long historical shadow, to the extent that some people will point to Henry VIII's break with Rome and say, good king, because he, if not established the Church of England fully, he set the groundwork for what would become the Church of England. It really become rooted under Elizabeth. Others will say, bad king, for the exact same reasons. They will point to him. So what makes a good king? Is it that he made decisions that lasted, whatever one thinks of them? Is it that he projected an image that still lingers? I mean, if you ask anyone on the street to name a king of England, it will be Henry VIII, I'm sure. Does that make him a good king? On the debit side, you could say, well, he left the country economically worse off than he found it. So surely that makes him a bad king. On the other hand, again, what was he spending it on? Things that entrenched the dynasty and made it last through pretty turbulent years following his death. So yeah, it's a really, really difficult question. Was he a good king? He was certainly very good at almost crafting the image of what we think of as a king. When we think of a king, it's that playing card image of Henry VIII. So that was him. I mean, he was an absolute master of the image. It's something we credit Elizabeth I with quite a lot, and rightly, I think, that she absolutely knew how to project the image. She learned that from her father. I mean, at every stage you see Henry moving with the times, from playing the virtuous young prince and selling it well, to playing the kind of strong, as his weight gain took over, playing the kind of image of the strong physical embodiment of kingship and majesty and all of that sort of stuff. So it feels like a really evasive answer. It does depend who you ask. I mean, if you ask people that are still extremely Catholic, no, he was Indeed, people that aren't necessarily religious can point to his dissolution of the monasteries and say, look at the destruction, look at the destruction of art, look at the waste.
Mm.
On the other hand, again, he did set the foundations for the Reformation, and the big part of English identity is Church of England. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, and also Cromwell should get blamed. Yes, he destroyed the monasteries, but Cromwell destroyed the castles, and he gets a pass most of the time because everybody's too bothered about the monasteries.
So,
But do you think, I mean, every now and then, I suppose it's actually in older books from the 70s and 80s that I see it most, there's this suggestion that Henry thought he should be called Henry the Great or Harry the Great. Is there any suggestion of that from the time, or is that just...
I've only come across that in the 20th century, the idea that he wanted to be called Harry
Yeah.
the Grey or anything like that. I don't think he was thinking in terms of a nickname or anything like that. He certainly did start using Majesty as his preferred form of address, Your Majesty, rather than just Your Grace or anything like that. But a lot of this was him trying to compete on the world stage, and that was really the European stage at the time. He was trying to be the equal of the kings of France. He was trying to be the equal of the Holy Roman Emperor. So it wasn't just vainglory, but it was vainglory for a reason. It was vainglory because he was trying to, and I feel like I'll be using this phrase a lot, and I don't mean to. He was trying to make England great again. He was trying to present this particular image.
That always sounds good though, doesn't it? Because it's mega.
So I think that again was Henry's thing. Henry's thing was trying to present himself as a kind of nationalist figure, as leader of England, but a greater England, an England that, as we might talk about, had a right to rule Scotland and had a right to the kingship of Ireland and could annex Wales and had a right to take over parts of France. So this was all territorialism.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole French issue had been around for a long time, and I guess in theory he did have a claim to the throne of France, but as previous kings had found, having a claim and actually doing much about it were not quite the same thing. But with the King of France and Charles V and so on, he had these heavyweights, didn't he? That he was competing with, or he probably felt certainly he was competing with for airtime. So it does explain quite a lot about him. What about his weaknesses? What are the sort of key weaknesses that Henry had as either a person or a king?
Well, I think that they're very intimately connected. I would say that Henry VIII's biggest weakness was insecurity. I think that for all he was overcompensating by trying to be this big, powerful man, I think it derived from insecurity, and it derived from the insecurity of the Tudor dynasty. Again, for some reason, historically, we've been really, really comfortable talking about Elizabeth I being insecure. Because she had been declared illegitimate, because there were rivals to the throne and everything. People haven't really spoken about it as much with Henry, whereas I'd say it's more obvious with Henry VIII. And how that impacted on the political sphere was, yes, there was the overcompensation, the trying to be big and mighty and powerful and sort of overplaying the part, but it also affected domestic politics in that he was terrified of being blamed for bad decisions or unpopular decisions. And how that manifested was finding scapegoats, and that led him to chuck away Cardinal Wolsey without a second thought, to destroy Cromwell without a second thought. It was they're to blame, it's their fault. He did it with Anne Boleyn to an extent, so it's her fault, everything's her fault. She's Mary, his daughter by Catherine of Aragon, is being treated badly. It's Anne's fault. She's the bad one. Henry's the virtuous one. So he ended up destroying a lot of people that were good politicians and had strong networks. People like Cardinal Wolsey again, Thomas Cromwell. They were useful. They were good at their jobs. His insecurity meant no time to blame them, so I'm not blamed.
And he was kind of playing into what had always been something of a feature, particularly in the 15th century, where opposition to the crown was not directed against the king because the king was anointed by God. It was usually directed at his advisors. In other words, he had evil advisors, and that was the problem. king
Yes.
couldn't possibly be wrong. And he was kind of playing into that, wasn't he? That, yeah, it's not my fault, obviously. What can I do?
So these guys were lightning rods. They were taking the blame. He could stand apart. This suited him very well because as someone that, again, could not handle criticism, this system worked well for him. It just led him to destroy people that could have continued to be useful to him.
And it's interesting what you said about his about the insecurity of the Tudor regime. And to be honest, Anne actually focused on that myself. In 1509, we've just had one king, one Tudor king. Well, that's nothing in the 15th century. You know, you could have quite a promising reign. Didn't mean that that particular family was going to carry on controlling things. So he may be, particularly he's quite young, he probably felt that particular political insecurity quite strongly. Although I always find it, I mean, it seems a bit panicky to me that he waits till the sort of late 1530s and so on to start executing people like Margaret of Countess of Salisbury and so on, which seems, I don't know, is it a knee-jerk reaction or is it a genuine? Why does he do that at the end when they've been in prison for donkey's years?
I think quite a lot of that was really stemming from opportunism. Henry has this reputation, again, fairly recently, for just cutting swathes through the nobility if they threatened him or if they were potential rivals or had a claim to the throne or anything like that. But yes, in the last few years, it seems like he's doing that, but it's because opportunity knocked at those times. So when there was a convenient reason to do something, to get rid of someone, he would do it. But the crucial thing is he always wanted to appear like he was doing things by the book. So he's doing this for a reason. He's doing this because at this time it's legally justified. He wasn't creating excuses to kill people. Well, maybe we'll talk about Anne Boleyn, but when it was rivals or potential rivals to the throne, he would generally wait until there was some plausible reason they had done something or could be embroidered. They'd done something very much embroidered. Now I've got an excuse. Now I can get rid of them, but I'm not the bad guy. I don't appear like the bad guy. So he always had the image in mind, I think. Henry always had, how is this going to look? How can I make it look so that I am the good guy here, or I am acting justly, or I am acting honorably?
So you'd say that he didn't strike sort of, there was nothing random about it. There was nothing sort of necessarily ill-considered. It was all sort of part of the image maintenance and that kind of aspect of his kingship.
Yeah, and that's why I always disagree with claims that something happened to him.
The head injury.
The jousting accident.
He went mad. No, he didn't. Right from the start of his reign, he was a kind of an opportunistic killer, and by that I mean for the times, an opportunistic politician. Strike people down when they give you a reason to.
Yeah. Well, Buckingham.
Do it.
Yeah.
Buckingham, prime example. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his dad's tax collectors, Dudley, and the other, I can't remember the other one's name. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right at the start of the reign, Empson and Dudley. Yes, yes. Again, that was a kind of populist move. Arrest them, keep them. Let's see how this goes. Okay, the public is very running strongly against them. Now I can actually win a claim by executing them. I won't just not look like the bad guy. I'll actually look like the hero if I do that.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to see a tax collector executed?
Exactly.
It was ever thus.
Do you think any of the later executions were with a mind to what happened with the princess in the tower and the idea that his son, if he died too early, his son was still going to be a child or a teenager and at risk of these rival claimants?
So people like Surrey, and when he locked up Norfolk, always, I used to hate Norfolk. I always used to think, what a horrible, evil man. But I've grown sympathetic towards Norfolk because he seems like loyalist to a fault. And then right at the end, Henry turns on him as well. And I think you're right, Sharon. I think it's him trying to imagine life after his death. I mean, he must have known death was stalking him in his final few years. And I think he did have in mind, how can I set things up so that once I'm gone, there'll be some measure of security for Edward. But it's also, again, I think that insecurity coming back. So how do I maintain a bit of control once I'm gone? How do I kind of set things up so that they still run the way I want them to run?
And it worked in a way because his will is the one that carried on the succession, not whatever Edward wanted to happen. It was Henry's will is the one that went through Parliament, so that's the one that we have to follow.
It was Henry's will that was causing problems for Mary Queen of Scots, for James VI and first. So I mean, right up until 1603, that will was causing problems.
Yeah.
So I suppose we have to get to the critical part of the discussion, which is basically the wives. So how did he end up marrying 6 times and executing 2 of his wives? I mean, I have to say, people go, Anne Boleyn should have seen what was coming, but no Queen of England had ever been executed before.
I think Anne, right up until the blade swung, right until the sword swung, I think she thought it's not going to go this far because it was unprecedented. It was totally unprecedented. I mean, there's this famous story of her sort of looking over her shoulder. I think she was probably expecting a last second pardon because that would have been much more normal than what actually happened. How did he come to marry so many times? So I'm going to throw something out there that's going to sound sensationalist. I think a lot of it had to do with Henry's libido and his potency or lack of potency, because he is one of the few kings for whom this keeps coming up in the historical record. So when he's trying to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, he no longer sleeps with her and is no longer able to sleep with her. It's her fault, of course. It's not his fault. It's
Yeah.
And then with Anne Boleyn again, everything is hunky-dory at her trial or at the trial of her and her brother. The question of Henry's potency with her, whether he lacks vigour or not, comes up. Jane Seymour's not around long enough for it to be a particular problem.
Although it did take him a few months to get her pregnant.
It did, and there was some talk about that as well. And then, of course, with Anne of Cleves, he tries various ways to end this marriage, and none of them work, and eventually he has to, with qualifications, admit he can't perform sexually with her, but only her, and it's her fault. And so I think a lot of the reason he marries Catherine Howard again, I think he probably assumed, okay, maybe I'll be able to do it with her. So I think his sexual potency, and a lot of it, I'm sure, obviously get psychoanalyzed, someone that's been dead for 500 years, but I'm sure it was a psychological problem when it came to Henry. Once he decided, I can no longer perform with this woman, she is now useless. She now has to go. After the first time in the long drawn out divorce proceedings or annulment proceedings, it's by the swiftest way possible, by the cleanest way possible, however that might be. So yes, Henry's libido, I think, has a lot to answer for. I mean, it makes sense when you think this was a hereditary monarchy. So it makes sense that whether the king can have sex with someone or not and can produce heirs or not is actually a huge factor in it. But even at the time, I mean, this was noteworthy that this guy is marrying quite a lot. People were commenting at the time, and they were being punished for commenting on it at the time as well. Famous story of the women said, how many wives will this king have? And immediately arrested for loose talk. People were able to see at the time, this is not normal. This is not normal behaviour.
No, and it's a valid question, isn't it, really? I mean, the thing is that what gets back to me is the fact that he was so desperate for an heir, yes, but he wasn't the only one who'd been like that. Edward I lost a number of sons before Edward II was born.
Yeah.
And he never seemed to have that panic about having an heir.
Funnily enough, something that no one ever talks about, I've not seen them talk about it, is neither did Henry VIII until Anne Boleyn, or at least until the 1520s. He was making promises about giving the throne over to the issue of his sister Mary, talking about these things when she was projected to marry Charles V, talking about their potential heirs and which one might get England and everything. There was no kind of mad obsession with having a son. And something happened. I think one of the big mysteries of Henry VIII's reign is what sparked that obsession with having a male heir. Because it wasn't, I mean, like anyone else, he wanted one like any other autocratic king at the time. He certainly wanted one. He was hoping for one. He expected one with Catherine of Aragon at some point. But this kind of famous or infamous obsession with siring a male heir is just not there until at least the 1520s. It suddenly appears. I don't know what, no one knows what triggered it, what suddenly made this. It was like a totemic thing. I now absolutely have to have a male heir by any means necessary. Why now? Why now?
That's true, because his daughter Mary, she was named Princess of Wales, wasn't she? She was recognised as his heir.
Yeah, he never had her formally invested, but he had her named it. And again, she was projected to be trained to rule. He was considering multiple marriages for her and how any potential heirs of her might, some in England, some in, I suppose, the throne of whoever she married. But again, he was looking at possibilities. So it's not as if he was totally blind to the idea that, okay, I might not have a male heir. That's okay. I've got a daughter. Things can work this way. Things can work that way. I've got a sister. She might have heirs. Things can work this way or that way. So he was absolutely aware. I mean, the possibility is he just didn't like any of the possibilities. So yes, he explored them. He decided he didn't like them. And that drove his obsession, or sparked his obsession, I should say, with producing this mailer. But yeah, it just wasn't there for a good chunk of his reign. And then all of a sudden it was.
Two questions, really. Might that not simply be that he got older and therefore, and he hadn't had a son and therefore felt, well, really this is getting to a stage where it might become a bit of a problem, so maybe I need to address it more closely? And secondly, did his bad jousting accident, whilst it may not have driven him mad, did it bring home to him his mortality?
Yes, I think it certainly did. I mean, if nothing else, the jousting, even if it didn't knock him crazy or anything, it certainly affected his mobility afterwards. I mean, he was physically a different man in that he couldn't exercise as much. He couldn't do the kind of sports that he used to do. So I think he was very, very aware of his own mortality. But that was 1536.
Yeah.
And he did several accidents before that, but he'd already married Anne Boleyn, for example. So he was trying to, not that she promised it, I think there's a myth that Anne Boleyn absolutely sort of held out the carrot of a male heir. No evidence that she actually did. But Henry, I think, hoped that by marrying her, again, probably because he could perform sexually with her, that would result in a male heir.
So what made him think that the only option was to execute Anne Boleyn? Why couldn't he have sent her to a nunnery or simply divorced her? Why did he have to kill her?
I think he had to kill her he didn't have to kill her. I think he believed he had to kill her because he didn't want another long drawn out annulment or anything like that. He didn't want any potential children by Jane Eyre. I've been reading some books for English.
Seventh wife.
Jane Seymour. Yes, Henry did not have a crazy wife in the attic. Now, I think he really was looking over her shoulder at the next prospective bride, Jane Seymour, and he thought, yes, I'll be able to perform with her. By this time, the male heir thing is very much in his mind. I might be able to produce an heir with her. That would be complicated if he had a still living previous wife, Anne Boleyn. So it made a kind of twisted sense to fully and finally get rid of her.
My favourite exam question used to be, was Henry VIII's marriage the cause or occasion of the break with Rome? I'm just thinking about surrounding the whole Anne Boleyn marriage. There is this parallel, it seems, course towards establishing the fact that he could do things that previously perhaps kings had not been able to do or had not risked trying to do, as in relation with the Pope. So how do you see that briefly? It's a huge I'm aware it's a huge topic, but was the motivation primarily to marry Anne, or did he really want to break with Rome? How do you see that?
I think they went hand in hand, but it started with him wanting to marry Anne. How do we know this? Because he was seeking by all means possible for a long time to get it done by the book,
Yeah.
to get it done with papal approval. And he might have stayed a very happy son of Rome had the Pope said, yes, absolutely, here's your divorce, all signed and sealed, all done by the book. However, once he realised the potential power that would accrue to him if he broke with Rome, then it suddenly seemed a very natural thing to do. He also was keen throughout his life to not be seen as a kind of revolutionary. I mean, Henry was a conservative man, and he wanted to be seen as a conservative man. What he was doing was restoring things to how they used to be. So, according to his argument, and I think he believed it, the popes in Rome, or the bishops of Rome, as he increasingly called them, have been usurping power that historically belonged to the kings of England. I'm going to right that wrong. It was the same line he used when he was trying to conquer Scotland, really, is the kings of Scotland have usurped the throne of Scotland from the kings of England for centuries. I am just going to right that wrong. I'm just going to put things the way they used to be to put them right. Sharon, you asked again there, why didn't he just have Anne Boleyn murdered? I think was that a very, again, easy answer to that. Henry wanted it done by the book. He wanted it to be played out on a public stage. She's in the wrong, I'm in the right, I'm the good guy, she's a twisted monster. Look at what she's done. It's all come out in open court. This is how it's supposed to be done. I'm doing things by the book.
Did he believe she committed incest? Had he managed to persuade himself?
I don't think he had. I will never know. People very often say, and I can see why, Cromwell produced the evidence and Henry convinced himself it was true. I think Cromwell was sent to find evidence. Henry, I'm sure, I mean, it depends on his levels of self-delusion. One thing that leads me to think he didn't believe it was his parading around, supposedly, of a play he'd written about Anne Boleyn, which is the one thing, the historical thing I wish somehow survived, and claiming to the Bishop of Carlisle that he believed she'd been unfaithful to him with 100 men. Did you, Henry? Do you really believe that? I don't think you do. This is performance. He's performing, I'm the victim here. She's the kind of twisted pervert that's been doing all these evil things. She's the story. So I don't think he did believe it. I think if he was capable of that kind of self-delusion, I choose to believe it. Therefore, I'll just close my eyes to it. But what I think he was better at, rather than deluding himself that untrue things were true, was closing his eyes to things.
Yeah.
Once this has been decided, let it happen. It's nothing to do with me. I'm going to have absolutely nothing to do with it. It's everyone else's fault. So I'm sure he blamed Cromwell. Okay, he set Cromwell in motion. Cromwell's delivered the evidence and is the bad guy. But if there's any doubt, well, it's Cromwell that did it, not me.
Yeah, I could only go on the evidence that was presented to me.
Exactly. I mean, it's the same line.
And I had to believe the evidence because it was presented to me and she was found guilty in a court of law.
Yeah.
So it's not my fault.
I mean, the people, the peers of the realm that sat in judgment, for example, people have said they must have known it was untrue because they were presented with some very sloppy evidence. However, the way that treason trials worked at the time was the Crown just, I mean, you just weighed the evidence. It's not as if you kind of forensically examined it. And there was a weight of evidence.
No.
All they had to do was say, yes, there's a weight of evidence here on the side of guilt. There's nothing exculpatory. We can pronounce her guilty, and we've just done what the law says we should do. Don't think about it too deeply. Don't question it too much. Just let the kind of dull weight of the law fall.
Coming back to Henry's libido, I can understand why he might have fancied Catherine Howard, young thing. What about the last marriage to Catherine Parr?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Why did he marry Catherine Parr? I think because something that historically has been ignored, it's much better now. People like Linda Porter have written really good books about Catherine Parr, and they've emphasised that she was a kind of fashionista, and she was cultured, and she was intelligent, and she was all these things. I think Henry was trying to kind of recreate the glitz of his earlier years in his early court with firstly the young Catherine of Aragon and then the young Anne Boleyn, where there was a fashionable, intelligent female at his side. I think he was trying to recreate that. Times had changed, obviously, so kind of impossible to recreate the past, always is. But I think that's what he's trying to do. There is another possible, and this is total speculation, which is that Catherine Parr had had no children by her previous marriages. Therefore, so you'd think, well, why is the king marrying someone that's not sort of proven fertile stock? Isn't one potential answer to that, well, when no children appear, it will be her that's to blame for it because she's proven infertile in the past? It's not the obese, frequently ill king's fault, it's his wife's fault. So again, able to cast blame very easily onto the woman and not himself.
I always think also, and tell me if I am way off here, but Catherine Parr was the one who she was about to be arrested and she was warned and she went running to Henry and the arrest was stopped because she'd appealed to Henry and he stopped it. And I've always wondered if Henry was one of these people who had this thing where he decided that Anne Boleyn was going to die, that Catherine Howard was going to die, and the way he dealt with it was if he didn't see them again, then they were dead to him already, so that's fine. With Catherine Parr, she actually managed to get to him. And so he was like, well, I can't tell her, I can't get her arrested now because she'll know it's me.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, the story comes from John Foxe in the Book of Martyrs. I know there's some debate about how honest he was in some of his things. I think it's probably substantively true in that really did happen. However, my reading of it is because Henry did a similar thing with Thomas Cranmer, for example, allow matters to proceed against them, allow their enemies to sort of scent blood and start, but then save them, step in, intervene. And I think it was a way of maintaining control, keeping the intended victim in line. So it's Cranmer, look how close you came to being destroyed and I saved you, so don't forget. With Catherine Parr as well, look at the enemies that were ranged against you. I could have let this proceed. I've stepped in to save you. Have you learned your lesson? Are you going to toe the line in the future? So I think that was his goal there. And it worked. I mean, it's something that we found worked, is you keep people in line by keeping them terrified.
Henry VIII is this kind of larger than life king, this figure, but we keep coming back to him. You know, every generation seems to come back to him. And obviously the Six Wives captures a lot of imagination. But what else do you think there is about this man, his reign, that draws not just people generally, but historians and writers back to him time and time again?
Yeah, I should have an answer to this because I'm one of these people. So it really back, continually draws me. Part of it is probably a self-perpetuating thing, and that the more films and TV shows there are, the more appetite we get for them because we feel we know, we want to dig deeper, and then we feel we've learned something, and so on. The other kind of stock answer I have to this is that certain figures and stories and events historically just are always kind of evergreen. And I think they need three things. They need some really strong visual imagery, which Henry and his reign has, because we can see the Holbein images. We can see the images of his wives, those that survive. There needs to be a good kind of hook. 6 wives, the king who had 6 wives. And then the third thing that's needed is, I suppose, room for debate. Why did all this happen? Why did that happen? All that sort of thing. If those 3 things are in conjunction, I think the historical event or figure or whatever it might be is just perennially interesting. And Henry and his reign has all of those things. I mean, has the imagery, it has the kind of catchy tagline that instantly draws your ear, and it has endless reams of debate. Why was this decision made? Why did he do that?
Do you think there has been a palpable move away from Great Henry towards a more critical view of him and of the 6 wives. You know, it was always seen as he had 6 wives rather than these women married Henry. And they were always seen in relation to Henry rather than as individuals. But in recent years, a lot more focus has been on them as individuals and Henry as the bad guy.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that is the big shift. Even those that think Henry was a good king and that he did things that lasted, things that have kind of took root in English history or British history. However, you would be hard pressed to find even people that think he was a good king that will also say he was a good person, because no one will. And that's one of the things I think would absolutely horrify Henry VIII, is the fact that the image that he spent so much time and money trying to cultivate, this image of him being the just and the liberal and the good, and everyone else was just bad, he was good, that no longer exists. I mean, that has failed spectacularly, to the extent that he is universally seen as a monster. No matter what he did or didn't do, or intended or didn't intend, no one really has a good word to say about Henry the man. Whereas Henry the man really was bound up with Henry the King and was trying to present as much as possible as a benevolent guy. And although we have that image of Henry the monster, Harry the Great, you mentioned, there was a lot of sometimes baffling fondness amongst the English people, particularly in London, for decades and decades and decades after Henry died. People were sort of recalling him fondly. There's stories about at Elizabeth's coronation, people crying out, "Remember good King Hal," and all that sort of stuff. So people seem to have a kind of fondness for him in the years after. And I think there's a reason for that as well. I think part of it is he was really, really, really good at presenting that virtuous king image, particularly during his early years. But the other reason I think for it is people tend to see the horrors of Henry's reign. They see the very high-profile executions. Anne Boleyn is the most famous one. I would suggest the men she was executed with as well. Catherine Howard. They see Thomas Cromwell. What is very easy to forget is these were the people at the top. Henry very visibly cut bloody swathes through the elite, through his politicians, through his wives. However, the stories of him executing 72,000 subjects, not true. They're not true. So his bloodiness was, I mean, he was swinging the axe in the political circles predominantly. Obviously, when the north of England rebelled, he pretty horrible reprisals. Not as horrible as Elizabeth had, I should say. She was much worse. But people don't see that. People see Henry and they see him as the monster because his victims are high profile. But at the time, if you weren't a politician or an outspoken clergyman, you were probably safe in Henry VIII's reign. Perhaps more so than you were in some of the later reigns.
Yeah, certainly attitudes have changed, even certainly in my lifetime, because when I was at school, they used to use the phrase "bluff King Hal." I'm not sure where that came from, but that was kind of the image. Yes, he executed a few people, but he was a great guy, sort of thing. And that has sort of gone full circle now, and or 180 degrees, and now, as you say, he's kind of universally seen as a man, as a kind of as a sort of monster. I guess all that we've just said about people looking at about the wives themselves and a change of attitudes in recent decades is probably responsible for that. But there certainly has been a change.
Can we blame the Victorians? You know, Henry VIII, great man theory of history.
Blame the Victorians for everything, yeah.
We do.
We blame the Victorians.
With good reason.
They had this view of history that they created so profoundly that it's taken a lot of getting away from. Like you say, the imagery he used with his paintings, with the artwork, and that probably helped.
This is kind of a side thing, but because of Henry's dominance in pop culture as well, look at how acting styles and drama has changed from Charles Laughton in the 1930s to is it Damien Lewis in
Yes,
Wolf Hall?
and Wolf Hall.
Yeah,
we've kind of moved from that semi-comedic, unnaturalistic acting style to acting styles that are kind of much more, I guess, psychologically aware or psychologically deep. So with that comes much more exploration of the man's decisions. I mean, in the private life of Henry VIII in the 1930s, he is this kind of buffoonish character, and the horrible things he does are glossed over, really.
Yeah.
That's kind of untenable now. You now want, or we expect, a deep psychological study of someone that is much more naturalistic and behaves much more naturalistically.
I think Henry VIII is also an exception in that with most kings, we tend to measure them by what they were at the end. You know, whether they had been successful militarily makes them a great king. With Henry VIII, there's this tendency to try and find that break, you know, the head injury or whatever that turned him bad, you know, whereas usually it's what they were at the end is what they were all the way through. With Henry, it's like, no, he wasn't like that all the time, was he? And, you know, he was nice when he came to the throne. Yeah, he executed his dad's tax collectors, but he's forgiven for that. You know, he married Catherine of Aragon. He was this chivalrous hero figure.
Henry loved being nice and being seen to be nice. But when people said no to him, he couldn't anymore. He could not any longer keep up the kind of nice act. But nothing thrilled him more than the opportunity to present himself as the chivalric hero, the guy, the benevolent hero. So all the stories about him saying that he would let Catherine of Aragon retire honourably and would treat her extremely well. At the start, certainly, of the annulment proceedings, he would have loved that because it would have given him the chance to look like the good guy if she had just cooperated. But increasingly, she didn't cooperate with his wishes, concede to his wishes. So he very quickly turned really 180 degrees. And that was, again, Henry, completely nice guy until you don't give him what he wants or you don't act in accordance with his wishes. I mean, the Kings of Scots found this out. Henry would be their best friend and neighbour and kinsman until James V refuses to break with Rome, for example. Now it's war.
Yeah.
And his sister Mary as well. He apparently promised that if she went through with this marriage, she could choose who she wanted to marry next time. So she did. And in order to make sure he kept his promise, she did it before going back to England. But then he literally extorted her French pension and all her jewels from her to forgive her.
Yeah, and there was talk of him executing Charles Brandon as well. I mean, he is considering executing him, and it was Wolsey that intervened. Probably, you look like the bad guy, don't do it. And Henry immediately, again, sensitive to image, okay, just chisel money out of them.
They've got to give me all their money, and then they can be happy.
Yeah, I'm a great fan of Wolsey, actually. I think he was a terrific operator, much maligned.
Yeah, and again, that came in even his physical image when he appears in films and when he's written about in the Elizabethan period as this kind of embodiment of the corrupt Catholic prelate, oversexed, he's overfed. All this wasn't going about at the time. And in his day, he was seen as extremely charming and effective.
Yeah.
So I suppose the real question is, and I think we've already had the answer for this, Henry, tyrant or teddy bear?
Tyrant. Who wanted to look like a teddy bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess that makes him even more interesting, though, in a way, doesn't it? This sort of the image he wanted to create and the man behind the image gives more layers for people to explore.
Oh yeah. Because you can look for those cracks. You can look for the kind of moments when, up until a certain point, he's successfully seeming charming and charismatic and teddy bear-like.
Yeah.
What causes the crack that suddenly reveals it to be a facade? And you can almost pinpoint multiple times in his reign the thing that causes the fracture.
Yeah, fascinating character.
Yeah, I often wonder how Jane Seymour slept at night, knowing what happened to Anne.
With one eye open.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when she didn't get pregnant straight away. She was worried that it wasn't going to happen and that he would have to get rid of her.
Yeah.
And how is that going to happen? And that in itself, all that stress wouldn't have helped to get pregnant.
Yes, I can imagine. Yeah. She's an interesting figure, I think, because comparatively little is known about her. So in terms of her motivations and everything, she's almost a blank slate, or that some people think she was conniving and that she schemed her way to the throne. Others think she was entirely passive, she was manipulated by her family. Others think she just was in no position to say no to anything. So she's interesting, Jane.
She's a bit of an enigma.
I guess in a way, though, she could be pretty certain she wasn't going to be murdered in her bed. She was going to see it coming.
Yeah.
Maybe not very soon before, but she was going to see it coming because he'd want to do it above board.
Yeah, she'd have her day in court. Yeah.
Yeah, but she'd also know that it was a fait accompli. Even if she did have a day in court, she'd know there was no way out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting thing as well to think after Anne Boleyn's execution, none of his wives could have felt entirely safe, entirely secure, and Anne Boleyn was only the second.
Yeah. And one of the great what ifs, of course, is what if Jane Seymour had survived, and how would the reign have been in what might well have been a more stable sort of political environment? You've got a son, you've got a wife, there may be other children. It kind of changed the dynamic. Her death was a kind of blow that he couldn't do anything about, as it were. That wasn't his fault.
Yes, this time it genuinely wasn't his fault. Legitimately wasn't his fault, and it wasn't his decision. So this was against something. One of the things Henry always disliked were decisions, consequences, things that were genuinely beyond his control.
So here's the question that we do see it an awful lot. He's buried with Jane Seymour because she's the one he loved.
He's buried with Jane Seymour because she's the one that gave him a son, and it was part of the family image.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we know this because in the 1540s, he was still having her painted into images to create this sense of family, of dynasty. You've come across this, I'm sure, a kind of fairly recent claim that they weren't interested, for example, in the name Tudor. They were just interested in being Henry VIII, Edward VI. They had no real conception of the Tudor family. I think that's wrong. I think Henry, if you look at what he was determined to do, which was keep the line going, she had a key role in that. He had to be buried beside her. She had to be painted into the dynastic portraits because she was the mother of the next king.
Do you think he loved any of his wives?
No, not as much. I think he probably thought he did.
Yeah.
What did Henry VIII love? Nothing that wasn't smothered in gravy.
Or himself.
Himself, yes. More than anything else, I think Henry loved himself. So I think he loved his wives to the extent they accorded with his wishes and expectations. The fact that he could turn on, Catherine of Aragon, the length of that marriage and the fact that he could turn so virulently against her, I think shows that the man was not a teddy bear again. Was he incapable of love? I don't know. No, because he loved himself. So yeah, I don't think he loved any of his wives. I think he thought he loved Anne Boleyn and Jane Seymour, but in Anne Boleyn's case, I think it was just a very, very strong infatuation, probably pushed further and further by the fact that he was being told no, he couldn't marry her, and that just made him want her more. And it became at some point, I think, a case of him having to be right. He'd invested time, he'd invested money, he'd invested political capital in trying to annul his first marriage and marry Anne Boleyn. There was no way he could save face and walk away from it without, as obviously, this horrific ending that Anne Boleyn got. But even during the kind of approach to the altar with her, it was a case of, no, I've done all this, I'm absolutely in the right, and I'm going to prove I'm in the right. And it's all going to be justified. Everything I've done and am doing is going to be justified.
Yeah, definitely.
Amazing character.
That's, I think, why we keep coming back. These questions: who did he love? Did he love anyone? And because it's all speculation, we'll never be able to get inside his head. No one will ever know what he was actually thinking and feeling. We only have his extraordinary actions.
Could you imagine if he'd written a diary?
Yes. I think it's easy because it would just be full of self-justification.
Dear diary, Thomas was horrible to me today. Which Thomas? All of them.
There haven't been all that many kind of big biographies of Henry. There have been some recent shorter biographies, but it's been years and years and years and years and years since there's been a kind of big book just on Henry himself. I think people haven't maybe wanted to touch it because on the one hand, you probably think, oh, it's all been said, which I hope it hasn't. On the other hand, I think he's horrible. And he's just this ghastly figure.
But I think there is room for one because, like you say, there hasn't been one in a while. And I think even when there have been books before, it's the new set of glasses you're looking through.
Yeah.
You know, we can't keep that Victorian image. You know, we have to change it around and look at it now and try and be objective. But being objective in the 21st century rather than in the 19th century is a different way, different objectivity.
I mean, I should point out there is some new stuff in terms of new sources that people haven't used before, particularly Scottish sources, Welsh sources, Irish sources. But yeah, I think this is a biography that is kind of post acknowledgement of his wives as real people, post acknowledgement of Cardinal Wolsey not being the kind of stereotypical corrupt prelate, post Wolf Hall. I still think Cromwell was horrible, I'm honest. But I think he was working for a horrible man, so I don't think he had much choice. But he wasn't the kind of stereotypical thug that you would get in the 1970s and things like in the movies.
So yeah, I think it's good that you're having another look at him. So what are you working on now?
For my sins, and probably stupidly, I'm working on a kind of sequel to Overlord called Gloriana, which is looking at Elizabeth's inheritance. I know Elizabeth's been looked at more than Henry.
Yes.
What I'm interested in is what she inherited from him and where she went with it. So if the kind of underlying thing in Overlord, the point of it is looking at his attempts to really embrace or take over, conquer the entire British Isles, I'm looking at how Elizabeth inherited that and how she handled it, sometimes much more brutally, but mostly more effectively than Henry. So when it comes to Scotland, for example, Henry would waver between claiming that the Scots were his rebellious subjects and claiming that James V, for example, was his beloved nephew if he just does what he wants and all that sort of stuff. Elizabeth's handling of Scotland was much, much more subtle. I mean, she wasn't declaring war. She did have some military interventions, but she was generally trying to govern by the back door much more effectively than Henry VIII. She built loyalists in Scotland. She did all this kind of stuff. Henry left her an extremely complicated history in Ireland, which she handled with horrific brutality in some cases. He left her a complicated inheritance in the north of England. Again, she was more brutal than he was in her reprisals against rebellion. In terms of Wales, his break with Rome led to some kind of extreme pockets of really, really ultra-reformist Puritanism that then she had to deal with in Wales. So yes, I had wanted to call it her father's daughter. Might be a bit much. So
how about Elizabeth the Great?
It's been done. Elizabeth Jenkins wrote Elizabeth the Great.
I knew it sounded familiar.
One thing I'll say again in Henry VIII's favour, Elizabeth is very frequently still known as a great queen, and she was in a lot of ways. Henry is known as a monster. One thing I'll say for Henry is he never kept his own torturer. Elizabeth did. She was really personally invested in how horrible she wanted their deaths to be. Henry, for his many manifold sins, walked away from it. Nothing to do with me. Execute them. Not my problem. I'm not responsible. Elizabeth, blood and guts. She's absolutely into it.
But presumably, in looking at his legacy and what she had received as a legacy, I mean, there are big contributions from Edward and Mary's reign. So she ends up with a big mess. He doesn't come to the throne in the middle of a big mess, but she does.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, you could argue that all three of them do. Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth come to the throne in the middle of a big mess, and how they deal with that is obviously different in each case.
So my kind of line on Elizabeth, and I'm still working on it, obviously, is that she was the apotheosis of the Tudor dynasty. But she learned from them all. She wasn't just sort of created. And instantly good at everything or bad at certain things. She learned lessons, so she had the luxury of learning from each of them. From Mary, she was able to learn how to present herself as this married to England figure. She stole it from her sister. From Henry VIII, from her father, she didn't just have the sort of inheritance of the British Isles or attempts on them. She also did what he did and tried to rewrite the previous reign. Was complicit in rewriting the previous reign as, oh, that was all terrible and I'm fixing it and I'm the good one. So yeah, she was learning at every stage from her predecessors and therefore was able to take the good points and go much farther with them. Again, Henry's mastery of image, she was better at it.
Yeah.
But the bad things as well. So when it came to bloody, horrible, horrific reprisals on rebels and traitors, she would take it even further than he did. Again, I think she gets a better rep, partly because of something I spoke about earlier. Henry's victims were very high profile. Elizabeth was very keen, I think, in reaction to Henry, to be seen to be absolutely resistant to executing high profile figures. When it came to commoners, let them hang until they dropped. When it came to high profile figures, Mary Queen of Scots is an obvious example. But even another Duke of Norfolk, she wanted to be seen as merciful as possible to the elites, to the upper classes, because that was, I think, what she knew had kind of damned her father's memory in some eyes.
And with Mary Queen of Scots, it was until they forced her hand.
Oh yeah, but she was sort of under the radar. She was killer privately. Right at the start of Mary's incarceration in England, Elizabeth was intriguing with the Regent Mar, the Earl of Mar. Right, okay, I'll send her back north. This is after she's in England, but I want her killed within 6 hours. So Elizabeth was plotting against Mary from the start. At the end of Mary's life, I don't want to execute her. She's writing to Sir Amias Paulet, her keeper.
Yeah.
Why can't you just poison her quietly, murder her quietly? So, yeah. Elizabeth, again, it's about the image. It's, I don't want to be seen to be being the bad guy. I want you to kill this person for me.
Yeah, so your subtitle's going to be Femme Fatale, is it?
That'd be a good one, actually. Yes, Juliana Femme Fatale.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. It has been an absolute pleasure. I think we could have done another hour or two. There's so much to cover, and I feel like we've only touched the surface because it's such a significant reign. So thank you very much, Stephen Veerapen. Or Veerapen, sorry, Veerapen.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I do highly recommend to everybody go out and get Overlord, The Life and Reign of Henry VIII.
Thank you.
And it's out literally now. I think it comes out the week this podcast goes broadcast.
Yeah. So. Well played.
Yes. Yes, it was definitely planned like that. It's not a fluke at all. Thank you very much for joining us, Stephen.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot, Sharon. Thank you, Derek. Cheers.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating. Right, well, what have we got next time? Next time it's episode 100. We will have got there. Yay! So do join us next time when we will be welcoming back the fabulous Max Adams and a celebration of the Bayeux Tapestry and Doomsday. I'm Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks. Thanks very much for joining us. Remember to give us some feedback in comments, whether you're on YouTube or in your favourite podcast provider. And we look forward to the next time.